Excited to get started with this. To introduce the panel, we'll just go down the line. Maybe we'll start with you, Lishan, just to give a 1 minute or less introduction to ourselves and who we are.
Less. So I'm Lishan Aklog. I'm chairman and CEO of Lucid Diagnostics, which is a cancer prevention molecular diagnostic company that commercializes a molecular diagnostic test for esophageal precancer to prevent esophageal cancer. I also happen to, and our product, EsoGuard, did receive Breakthrough Device Designation just prior to the pandemic. I also serve on the board of AdvaMed, so I've been quite active in a lot of the advocacy work and legislative activity around the transition from MCED to TCED, and I had the really interesting experience of testifying in front of Congress on this rule in one of the subcommittees.
Interesting, that's one word for it, right? Yeah. Nate Beaver, I'm a partner with Foley and Lardner in our Washington, D.C. office. I also co-chair our medical device area of focus. My practice is really an FDA regulatory-based practice, working with life science companies as well as Medtech companies, sort of navigating the FDA process, and then post-approval I deal with everything from compliance issues, advertising and promotion issues, and other FDA-related enforcement issues. So happy to be here today. Thanks, everybody.
Aguilar, co-founder and CEO of INBRAIN Neuroelectronics. We are a graphene-based, high-resolution neural platform for central nervous system and peripheral nervous system applications.
I'm Kwame Ulmer. I'm the managing partner of Medtech Impact Partners. We're a regulatory strategy consulting firm. I'm also fortunate enough to have collaborated with Assembia, which is a regulatory intelligence software platform, on some research where we looked at some 2023 Breakthrough Designation data, and we have some hot off the presses results for that.
I can't wait to hear that hot off the press. He kind of teased it before we got up here, so now we're all wondering what it is. But before we get into it too far, I think let's talk just about what breakthrough designation is. And Nate, I know you wanted to kind of introduce the topic of what it even is. Do you want to kind of give a rundown?
Yeah, sure. I'll hit the high points. And I know Tyler threw a lot of acronyms at you to start here. We're going to try and decode some of those throughout the talk. But just to sort of high level, even for those who may not really be familiar with breakthrough designation and the process on the device side, it actually started as on the therapeutic side as part of the overall accelerated approval process with FDA. So you had everything from accelerated approval, priority review, fast track designation, and then breakthrough designation on the therapeutic side. In 2015, that was also through legislation shifted over to the device side, and we've seen designations since that time. Now, what is it basically? There's two criteria you have to meet. The first is that the device provides for a more effective treatment or diagnosis of a life-threatening or irreversibly debilitating human disease or condition. So condition, first criteria, everyone has to meet that. And then the second criteria, there are a couple buckets you can fall into, and you have to meet at least one of these criteria, which include representing a breakthrough technology, no approved or cleared alternatives exist in the marketplace, the product offers a significant advantages over existing approved or already cleared alternatives. And then the fourth is a little bit of a catch-all, that the device availability is in the best interest of patients. So again, have to meet one of those two criteria in order to qualify. From a timing perspective, very broadly, once you submit your request for designation, has to be before you submit your application of either a PMA or a 510K de novo application. Anytime before you've made that type of submission, you can submit for breakthrough designation. FDA will get back to you within 30 days if they have additional questions, and then they will get back to you within 60 days as to whether you've been granted or approved or denied. So relatively, short time frame in order to be able to do it. Now, very broadly, and we'll get more into the specifics of this, but what do I get from breakthrough designation? Well, you get more and faster feedback, right? So FDA, more collaboration, more intense collaboration, and generally faster collaboration with FDA. You also get priority review. So, get put to the top of the queue as opposed to first in, first out for a normal review, and some additional resources. Some of that's a little bit vague, but again, the intent from an FDA perspective is let's push these through the process as quickly as we can. Now, caveat, that doesn't necessarily mean faster, and in fact, when Kwame talks about some of the time frames, it's not the case that simply because you have a breakthrough designation, you're going to get cleared or approved more quickly than a typical device going through the 510K. FDA acknowledges many of these types of devices are more novel, perhaps more challenging. So it doesn't mean it's a fast process. Hopefully it's a faster or at least a more collaborative process. For PMAs, you can get either expedited review of a pre-approval, or in some instances that pre-inspection review will actually be pushed to post-approval or post-clearance. And then regular status updates, again, just how do we move this process faster? Last two things I'll talk about briefly because we're going to talk about them a little more. Eligibility for the TAP program, and I think Carolina is going to talk about that. And then, as was teed up early on, potential for collaboration with CMS through what's now called the TCET program, which is different from the MCIT program, and we'll decode those.
Why don't we just jump into those now? Because I know Lishan's been pretty intense in the legislation. You've been involved in that. You want to break some of those down?
Yeah, I don't pretend to be a government advocacy expert, but I was asked to, in my role on AdvaMed, to participate in. So the bit of the history without going to. So MCIT is medical coverage of innovative technologies,
right.
And the previous administration was all set to come into effect, and it was fairly broad. And from a companies, we'll talk about some of the advantages. What it offered effectively was a period of national coverage under CMS for breakthrough devices that actually completed and got approved upon approval.
Right, so automatically, essentially.
Automatic,
You got
which is
approval.
Super attractive for
Yep.
those of you who are dealing with, like us, who are dealing with reimbursement right now. That got pulled when the new administration came on, and a new process called TSET, which is transitional coverage for emerging technologies, replaced it. And that has some similar themes, but it's much weaker. Let's just be frank about it in terms of the types of technologies. There was a sense, maybe without going into all of the history, there was a sense that that CMS did not want to be a rubber stamp. There was issues around Medicare, the applicability of the efforts that went to FDA approval in a Medicare beneficiary population, and a variety of other objections that the new CMS under the new administration came up with, and they put forth a proposed rule that's now moving forward extremely slowly, and it was the subject of a hearing because there's legislation that is HR 1691, I believe it was. I should know this because I was at that hearing. That's seeking to basically capture the broader, more attractive elements of MCIT, of the MCIT, and so there's this tension between the executive branch activities and the legislative activities putting pressure on them. The rule is not, it's moving slowly. AdvaMed put forth a somewhat toughly worded letter recently saying, what's up, guys? This should have been done already. And so we'll see what comes out of it. And we can talk about some of the details of the deficiencies and why it's much less useful and interesting for companies. And therefore, since that's one of the pots at the end of the rainbow, it has an impact on the impetus to pursue breakthrough designation.
Yep, and one really simple thing on one of the other issues, or one of the less attractive parts on it, is CMS has been clear that there are going to be only a certain number of devices that qualify, right?
5 a year.
So it's a much smaller cohort that we'd be potentially looking at.
It's just 5 a year, which is basically a lottery, which completely transforms the incentive.
When it comes to the benefits, I think that's one of the things most people are interested in. I don't know if you want to reveal some of the benefits that you found from that study.
So, and my colleague Christian Johnson is in the back with additional information with the full report. But essentially, if you have breakthrough designation and go through the 510K pathway, the median FDA review time is the same whether you were breakthrough designation or not. The time savings, Christian, is if you're de novo or PMA. 3 months for de novo, 7 months for PMA. And I've been thinking about this a little bit. If you are well capitalized, let's just say you just closed your Series A, and you're debating whether to apply for breakthrough, and you believe you're PMA or de novo, and you have data-hungry investors, maybe you want to apply for breakthrough. But if you're a 510K, I think the jury is in. First of all, there are only 5 slots.
lottery. It's called the lottery.
Yeah, it's a lottery. And if you're going through the 510K pathway, I don't think there's a lot of benefit.
Okay. Well, Carolina, maybe we can shift slight gears, because I know you wanted to bring up the TAP program, or the TAP, I guess I should call it. Do you want to break down what that is briefly, and then talk about how it could tie in?
Yeah, so if you have FDA Breakthrough Designation, the FDA, it's piloting a program which is called Total Life Product Cycle Advisory Program, where actually you could qualify, and if you are part of, you get also more support, not only on clinical reviews and technology reviews, but also in areas like market access, connectivity with patient advocacy groups, user needs, things like that. And we meet, so we are part of that, and we meet FDA every month. So it's really regularly. And planning in advance the different topics that you want to discuss, they bring the relevant experts to have a deeper discussion. You can also pre-submit information for them to review and be more prepared. And actually, it's been only a couple of meetings, so I cannot say much yet. But a couple of meetings that we had were very substantial and very promising. So I hope that, I think it serves also as an incentive for the team to be ready. So I use it as well internally to push topics that we anyway need to discuss, and be ready for those meetings and have effective outcomes.
Lishan?
I just had a couple things to that, because the TAP program was initiated as part of MEDUFA 5, which is how FDA gets paid by us industry through user fees. And it was I had some visibility into that negotiation. And Doug, I don't know if any of you know Doug Kelly, who is, what's his title? He's, I think, second to Jeff Shuren at CDRH. He comes from this world. He comes from the VC world and from the industry world. And if you talk to him when they were conceiving this really is what Breakthrough should be in many ways. It has, the spirit of it is to bring more of an entrepreneurial spirit for FDA to think more like we do, to bring in outside experts and move it forward. It started as a pilot in cardiovascular, and I guess neuro is now. So I think it's interesting to bring that up in this context, because Breakthrough has certain advantages. The data is mixed in certain levels. This is really intended to be a more, that on steroids in terms of the collaborative nature. There's even talk of bringing payers in, as there are these advisors that are actually outside of FDA that are hired with special expertise to basically inform the process moving forward, which is really unheard of. And it's meant to be, it's a pilot, but it's actually, Jeff Shuren's vision is for this to be in some ways where the future of how the process would be moving forward, which would be great.
Right, sort of more of the model. I mean, my take on it, it's sort of super breakthrough designation, right?
Super.
Right. It's like super, right. You get higher, the review division level involvement, more involvement, quicker involvement, and more feedback
And the outside and the external experts. So
right,
it's not
exactly.
just internal. They're bringing in people, again, from the physician community, the payer community, and others to actually opine on it, which is pretty unprecedented, I think.
Right, so hopefully that actually gets rolled out more generally.
Yeah, I think there was 5 cardiac. I think it's 15 this year, and the plan is to continue through MEDUFA 5, which is a 5-year cycle, to move it forward. And I think the expectation is if it's successful, it will be permanent in the next cycle.
Right, and the numbers I had read was that as of March of this year, FDA has enrolled 36 devices in the TAP program.
Okay. Yeah.
So if we go back to the breakthrough designation, I guess since we're supposed to be talking about that, but I wanted to bring that up because you wanted to, Carolina's great topic. What are some ways people could really get the most out of it? If we have some people in the audience who have achieved that breakthrough designation, how can you get the most out of that, whether it's through insurance and reimbursement? Whoever wants to hit the buzzer.
So I think it's very important to have a roadmap that you want to discuss. And for instance, we do machine learning, and there's a whole debate about how to do machine learning in Medtech. So this is one of, for instance, the topics that we bring on the table, and we show how we have been doing things, how we build our algorithms, what is the vision for the future. And of course, the idea is that they bounce back with what is allowed and what is not, but also how to build the future of machine learning when it comes to implantable smart devices. But we have also biocompatibility, right? Graphene is a new material, it's a novel material. That falls anyway under the FDA breakthrough conversations. But here we can deepen a little bit more about it. We recently asked them for patient advocacy groups because we are rebuilding some of our new user needs with expanded feedback, and we wanted to actually get to know other groups within the United States, and they got us in touch with some of these patient advocacy groups. And of course, market access will come very quickly because we have just finished a reimbursement landscape, and now we are ready also to present that data to them and verify if what we are thinking as a roadmap makes sense, and they validate it. So they will also bring around the table those kind of experts. So I think it's quite rounded as a program, and it seems so. Next year I can report more.
So Christian and I have been talking about early stage companies and these major milestones, but then there are several meaningful mini milestones. We got feedback and buy-in from the FDA on our first-in-human study. We got feedback from FDA on the pivotal. We got feedback from FDA on our accuracy study, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And if you're well capitalized, if you're raising, let's just say, a very large seed, and you have patience and runway 12, 18 months, you can give these meaningful mini updates to multiple stakeholders, not just your investors, but your KOLs, your advocacy groups. It's a wonderful, structured way to really get impact from each step along that roadmap and give these meaningful updates because you have the validation from the FDA.
Did you have?
Hey, sure, I can. My experience is going to be focused on the stage that Kwame mentioned, which is, thinking about whether you want to pursue this or not, and you'll understand in a second why that is. So we, in 2019, when we had licensed this technology, we were planning on launching it as a laboratory-developed test. So there's a unique aspect to what we're doing that that we're in the diagnostic space, and so our plan was to launch it as a laboratory-developed test, but then pursue PMA approval as an in vitro diagnostic. So that was how we engaged with FDA. We had a plan on our pivotal study for the PMA. And what was cool about it was actually in the same setting, these were in-person meetings pre-COVID. We had our pre-sub for the PMA, and then the same people basically. One meeting ended and the next meeting started, and we had our breakthrough conversations, and it was great. Our motivation at that time, given that at that point in time we were planning on proceeding full steam ahead with the PMA for the IVD, the primary motivations were, I would say 95% was the pathway to coverage, because coverage for diagnostics is pretty brutal, and so that was the pot at the end of the rainbow. We also are a public company, so we felt that the buzz around the FDA thinks you've got a cool breakthrough device would have some value. Yeah, I think that had a bit of it was fairly short-lived. I don't think really after the initial announcement it helped us much in terms of our capital raising. So what happened then was two things. One, we just, capital was tight, and we decided we would and we were able to commercialize this as a laboratory-developed test, so we decided to push off the IVD. But even if we hadn't, COVID hit, and because of the swarm of work in the OHT7 branch, which does diagnostics, they completely shut down all breakthroughs. So there were many breakthrough diagnostics that had zero benefit for the entirety of the pandemic. And so by the time it ended, we were well on our way, and so we haven't utilized it. So now that the prospect of national automatic coverage at the end in sort of the MCIT more attractive model is shaky, and it's non-existent for diagnostics, because in TSET, diagnostics are not only does you have to sort of, am I going to win the lottery of five for the year, they explicitly exclude diagnostics. The House bill doesn't, but the TSET rule as proposed. So without coverage, I'm with Kwame at every level. It's likely not worth it, and it's definitely not worth it for diagnostics at this point.
When you say it's not worth it, so there's multiple benefits, I suppose. And a regulatory strategy is one of those. Would you agree that across the board, whether it's marketing and so forth, or have you thought about the additional benefits?
So I do think, just like Lishan, in terms of does it impact your FDA timeline, then does it impact your reimbursement? The answer pretty much is no with TSAT. And then do you get any brand value out of it? The only other unique benefit, and we probably should come up with a checklist or an algo for this. Is it worth it? And then you just pop out, yes, it is.
That's good.
You know, we're going to trademark that, Christian. We're going to build an argument. The other one besides brand value, time, your comments really struck me about bringing your different stakeholder groups together and keeping them informed along this journey, because it's a long journey. The last thing I'll bring up, and my colleague, we worked at the FDA together, is in the audience, Allison Kumiyama. I think sometimes about potential variability across these offices and review times. And I don't know if anyone has really cracked the code on that or really could say one office is more or less consistent than the others. But it's always something top of mind for that early stage CEO. Are we getting like a fair shake? Is this a slow group, a fast group, et cetera? And you can never really know.
Okay, so for class 2, still maybe not worth it.
Yeah.
PMA, class 3, de novo.
Maybe.
Okay. Well, maybe we'll go down the line. I'm curious what everybody thinks. Carolina, you experienced it.
I'm happy. I would do it. I mean, I would do it again and 1,000 times more, because I think, as you said, this is a long journey, and knowing your stakeholders and understanding their opinions and getting early input about what is going to work and is not going to work, I believe it's going to save us time. Sometimes we have these internal debates and we hire consultants, and until we have the answer, months have passed. And this is the straight way to test, am I going the right way without spending all this money on consultants? Not that I love consultants, so. And
we love you more.
But what I mean is that sometimes you have to be practical, and for me, this is a validating way that makes you understand, even with consultants, am I on the right path, right? So I think it's totally worth it. But again, I will come back next year and let you know more. But so far, it's been great.
I love a panel that doesn't agree, but I know you want to say something.
I'm going to backtrack my naysayer comment in one respect, which is breakthrough plus TAP. Sign me up. And actually, I think AdvaMed lobbied for the first TAP group to be Diagnostics, to be OHD7, and they went with cardiac. But that I definitely agree with. I think breakthrough alone, for us, it was a pretty straightforward clinical trial strategy. It was without the reimbursement, it just wasn't helpful.
Right, and I think to LaShawn's point here is that if you'd asked this question prior to 2001 when we were under MCIT, as everyone knows, the FDA process is not an easy process, but at least when you talk to people, would you rather go through the FDA process or deal with CMS? I think there's a pretty clear answer on that reimbursement continues to be the larger challenge, right? So if you had asked this prior to 2021 when we were under an MCIT, you'd say, well, absolutely. If breakthrough gets me guaranteed 4 years of coverage, then sign me up every day of the week, right? But we're not in that situation anymore, and because the rule for TCET, still not final, limited in a lot of different ways, the value on that side just really isn't there. So I think at this point you really have to ask yourself, if the only value I'm getting is from the FDA side, is there value to that or not? And I think it depends on a couple factors. As Kwame was talking about, if you have a relatively straightforward 510K, the answer might be, we just want to do our pre-sub, we want to get this in, there's no reason to go through the breakthrough designation process, because that's just going to add more time here. Yes, there's a little bit of sexiness to it, you do get that bump on a press release, but ultimately, the value of it is it's a little bit squishy, because there's not a lot of structure around what precisely you get in terms of time frames and those sorts of things. It's supposed to be more collaborative, more sort of warm and fuzzy, and part of it is what you make of it, right? You do need to be interactive with FDA. You do need to be more on top of things, I think, and you really kind of have to press FDA to make sure you're getting the value out of it. Because if you're just going to sort of sit back and say, well, you know, we're not going to push this, then there really isn't so much value to it, I think.
Let me add something there. That's precisely what the debate internally was about. And actually, if you have a 510K, getting an FDA breakthrough, it's kind of contradictory because you are doing a pre-sub for a, you know, like
Substantial equivalent.
exactly a substantial equivalent with a predicate, and then you're saying you are breakthrough. So
Yeah, right.
it didn't felt right, and therefore we went pre-sub. But then on the rest, on the class 3,
Yep.
is a driven agenda,
Right.
As you said, if you show up with no content, you're going to have zero benefit. But if you prepare well and you squeeze the lemon in the good sense, you know, it's going to be effective. And the teams usually feel energized because they got something out of that and they got some of their questions resolved. So.
There's just one data point I think is worth adding that will reflect on the lack of sexiness as well as one of the reasons why TSET is so weak, which is there are a lot of breakthrough devices. I think the number I heard was 400 or so. So your denominator, you know, when it comes to sort of the sexiness part, it's more common than you might think. And that was actually one of the fundamental reasons why CMS objected is that, well, we got 400. It was insincere, honestly, in my opinion, because there are 400 designations, but that's not the number of actual devices that would get cleared and would be entrance into the program. But the lottery aspect of it, if you're doing 5 a year, and let's just say, I don't know, 80 of them or 50 of them ultimately get approval, I think should be at least that. Then that's your denominator on the lottery. That's your chances of being one of five out of what should be dozens.
Right. And I have the numbers
actual.
here. So as of June 30th, 2023, which is the most recent data that I could find, combination of CDRH and CBER had granted 839 designations, but a total of 81 devices had received marketing authorization in that time.
Yeah, so Christian and I, in concert with Dr. Jennifer McCaney, did some research and interviewed over 100 medical device companies. And one of the quotes when we asked them about breakthrough at the time was, they're giving away breakthrough like candy, right? So
Doesn't mean you're going to get approval, though.
does not mean you're going to get approval. That is so true. So getting to Lishan's earlier point, my sense is breakthrough's been around for a while. There is a branding bump, but is that enough? I don't know.
There's one contradiction in that. The one thing I think, I was scratching my head when you said that number, because the overall rates of approval for PMA devices is quite high. It just takes a while.
Right.
and from our experience, the bar that our pre-sub meeting for the IVD was much lower with regard to the requirements. It was a 900-patient study versus what we had, the bar that we had to reach to show that we were, you know, the criteria that you mentioned were, you know, essentially a breakthrough was a much, much larger study. So that actually explains to me why those numbers, 80 out of 800 is, you know, is more consistent. It's not inconsistent with the fact that PMAs ultimately, most of them do get approved.
Right. And there have been a lot of breakthrough designations the last couple of years, but again, it doesn't necessarily mean your approval is going to be that accelerated. So it's not to say they're crashing and burning, but there's just a large backlog of products that are still in the queue, still being reviewed.
We have just a few minutes left, and whether we advise them to do this or not, you know, people want to do it anyway. They're not going to listen to what you say. So if they're going to try to pursue it, let's just give one piece of advice. If you're pursuing breakthrough designation, do you have a piece of advice?
Yeah, get the juice out of that lemon squeeze, be very structured, and set up those sprint meetings. Just take the bull by the horns and proactively set them up and know what you want to get out of every single sprint meeting.
Caroline?
I agree. The other piece is that you don't need human data. We actually got it with large animal preclinical data, but of course it has to be solid, well-structured, and meaningful, but it's possible.
Nate? Any advice?
Go in with a design and advocacy in your submission as to why you qualify, right? You really have to think about it in advance. Why do I meet the criteria? What's the data that I have to support it? And the data can, you're making an argument that there's essentially a reasonable probability that you can meet these standards, right? You don't necessarily have to show to be able to demonstrate. That's what the approval process is for. But you've got to go in with a strategy of, what's your argument for why we qualify, and make sure, in your own mind that you're ready to take advantage of the benefits that can be there.
Yeah, I guess I'll answer that same question about what should you do to get it if you're determined to get it. I would say, have a well thought out plan, but bring the right people to the meeting. So we had Alberto Gutierrez, who used to actually run the division, sitting at the table across from people who used to work for him, and we had the leading gastroenterologist in this space, and that really clinched it. But also be careful that you're not in the pursuit of, just reiterating something I just said, in pursuit of breakthrough device, you're not increasing the bar for your PMA. You might have to do both. You might have to have an IVD, a regular path, and then the pathway for that would get you coverage, if it was there, would be a higher bar.
By the way, I had a great consultant on the process.
We'll tell you who that was later. So breakthrough plus TAPS. Thank you so much. If those of you probably have additional questions, we'll be outside for a few minutes. If anybody has additional questions, would you say? And we'll let you all get back to the next session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.